We begin with Josh Wolf, a freelance video journalist and subject of national attention due to one of your tapes.
Yeah, indeed.
It is something. Did you ever think this would occur over your tapes that you do regularly?
Yeah, I cover civil dissent on a fairly frequent basis on my video blog and also get it out in other places. I can't say that I ever thought that anything like this would occur, but I was always prepared for this possibility because, you know, if you look around, you see other things like this, so you have to be prepared for the worst and hope for the best.
Okay, we don't want to spend a lot of time on the incident, but why don't we just get into the specifics of how a federal grand jury put the pressure on you to release a tape, very briefly.
Well, essentially there was a protest that occurred in the Mission on July 8th of last year. During the protest, a police officer was injured fairly seriously, and there was also, according to the federal government, an alleged arson attempt on a San Francisco patrol vehicle. I neither witnessed nor filmed either of these things.
They know that?
I have a signed declaration stating that, and I believe my lawyer also has a signed declaration stating that, and obviously I would be in perjury if I was lying in that regard. And I think that if there is, like, I'm not sure what the effects for him would be, but I imagine they'd be even more severe.
Yes.
We've also offered to screen the tape for the district judge.
Now, I want to stop for a moment because you and I probably know the incident. The theory is that if a piece of property that's funded by the federal government is damaged in any way and deliberately, then the federal government has a right to step in. And they're claiming that someone shot something or used some kind of device to damage a tail or a police car. So that entitled them to come into this jurisdiction.
Right, that's mostly correct. What the law actually states is that if there's an agency that receives federal funding, then any arson attempts, this specific law actually only involves arson, any arson attempts, the government has a right to step in because they put their money into this organization's buying property, therefore they have a fiscal interest.
So I thought, because you had published part of the taping on your website.
Right, the night of the event.
Part of it was not. And I understood that it was the part that was not on your website that they thought there would be some evidence or some proof that, or some information that they could bring to a grand jury for possible prosecution. And you're saying that the rest of that tape did not show any part of that incident of the police officer being hit in the skull and very badly
right,
hit.
Yeah,
a major concussion. And as well as the car not being hit. You're saying it's not part of that tape.
Right, and in regard to the police officer that was injured, Officer Shields, I was actually filming his partner at the time, and I'm sure they have a record of how far apart they were. I don't know for sure, but they were a distance enough apart that I was unaware of that incident even going on, and they were going on at the same time. So it's impossible that I would even have that stuff. In terms of the alleged incident with the police car where someone, basically the story that they're putting forth is that someone took a firecracker 4 days after the 4th of July and threw it onto a piece of foam that was lodged kind of abutt with the police car. So it wasn't some sort of IED. It was a firecracker that I'm assuming could have been bought in Sonoma County or something.
But you're saying even that was not on the outtakes of your tape?
No, there's nothing to that effect on
All
my
right,
tape.
now let me ask you this. How can I think grand juries serve their purpose, but they have a great deal of power, and you've discussed this in interviews, the power of grand juries. Generally, though, they can't require something unless what you have in your mind or on your tape has to do with an incident that they're investigating.
Right.
So what is it they're looking for?
They're investigating the alleged arson. I'm sorry, they're investigating the alleged attempted arson. If you look at the damage report for the police car, there's 4 boxes: damaged, burned, stripped, and drivable. Damaged is marked, drivable is marked, but burned and stripped are not. And when you look over onto the other box that explains the damage, it's a right rear tail light.
Okay, and that's what I understand. That if you've said you've signed a affidavit that there's nothing in your tape about that incident, then what are they looking for? Or what have they told you they're looking for?
Exactly. The scope of their investigation, as far as we're concerned, or as far as we've been notified, is the alleged attempted arson of city property.
Okay, then I have to ask you this question. I understand your principles as a journalist and so on, but if you had the information, and there are stories in Washington like this, where someone actually does have information, but's withholding it. They definitely have the information. If you don't have that information, why don't you just give them the tape?
Because that establishes a precedent that the federal government can override or circumvent state shield laws for all sorts of stuff. I mean, this is this specific law, but this notion of the law, this interpretation, means that anything that occurred on a university campus that receives federal funding, any road that receives federal funding, like, it has a very broad potentiality.
No, I understand that. What I meant is, and I understood that what you had on tape did apply to this incident with the police car, regardless of whether it was a true arson or not. In certain cases of Judith Miller, or let's say the two reporters that are refusing to talk about the Balco case,
right,
and so on and so forth, those reporters and journalists actually have something and admit that they have something, but refuse to reveal it. You're saying that you don't even have anything to hide.
Right. Which is why we offered to screen it in chambers with the judge, Judge Alsup, and he refused.
Why?
Why did he refuse?
Yeah.
I think his statement was something like, you had an opportunity when you were pleading the fifth, we provided a document with some information. He's like, you should have done it under the fifth document about the Fifth Amendment issues. Basically, he just kind of said, it's not my job to see it.
Do you think they're just gunning for you?
Honestly, I feel like they're gunning for journalism. We have, I think, 5 journalists right now who could potentially be facing jail time for their work. We've got Sarah Olson and another reporter who interviewed Lieutenant Watada, who's I think he's an Army lieutenant who refused to go back to Iraq. They haven't been subpoenaed at this point, but they've said they want to talk to them about their interview. We have the 2 reporters from the Chronicle, and we have myself. Prior to that, we had Judith Miller. These are these 6 different journalists in 4 different instances where the government is trying to break these protections that are necessary for journalism to actually be practiced in itself.
So you think it's a, but wouldn't they be doing some more high-profile cases if aren't there more opportunities for them to take some, more old-age media journalists or reporters or investigative reporters and use them as an example? Why would they choose you specifically for when it appears? I would imagine they know that your tape will not show anything about the incident that they're investigating. Do you think they know that, or do they think you are lying and that you will sign a document saying that there's nothing to do with what you're looking for? What do you think they think?
It's not my place to say what I think they think.
Do they think you have something on the tape that's valuable?
It seems unlikely in that I'm not stupid enough to perjure myself.
That's what I would imagine.
Which would be a crime, which I think would be 2 years in jail.
That's
I'm
what
not going to
happened with
perjure
Libby.
myself on the grounds that I think I'm going to be strong about this issue.
Right.
And then lie. Like, why would I just not mention that in the document?
But what I mean, you have asserted that to them, and I think they understand that. Is this just now a standoff between you and maybe the U.S. Attorney's Office, and there's egos in the way on their side, or how do you think this is going to play out? Because I gather they want you back in jail.
Yeah, I'm actually going back in jail tomorrow, but just by the time people are watching this, I'll be in jail.
Back in Dublin.
Right.
So is this have something to do with? As I saw in the ABC news, it seemed that their egos build up here, and sometimes even in the U.S. Attorney's Office, is it possible this is a standoff, and they're not going to let up because they don't want to give in?
I'm sure that's a possibility. Honestly, I think that the reason they chose my case to pursue so heavily is that the case of the Chronicle is Hearst Corporation. They can afford the best lawyers in the world. You go after an independent journalist, I don't have Hearst Corporation providing legal assistance to me. I had to seek out counsel, and I've been very blessed to have 3 different law firms at this point joining my case. Some quite prestigious lawyers are involved. However, I don't know whether they were anticipating that, and you know, I think it was an easy target.
How much of this, and we've avoided it, how much of this really has to do with the fact that you're on a new media as a blogging medium versus traditional newsprint or you know, evening news? Is that really that relevant to the situation?
I'm sure it's relevant to a lot of people. Certainly in the discussions that have gone on the internet that I followed, it's very relevant to a lot of people. In terms of the case itself, they never asserted that I wasn't a journalist, possibly because they do feel that I'm a journalist, but more likely because they're so certain that there are no shield protections for journalists in the federal government, and they
no matter what media they're in.
No matter what media they're in.
California has a shield protection.
49 states plus the District of Columbia have shield protections.
Okay. So you think this is a federal government act and an operation here? This could never happen. Just for example, here's a question I did have for you. I was curious when I heard about the incident. Had you a tape of the officer being hit severely in the skull, and the police asked you for that, would you have given it to him?
Would I have given it to the police?
San Francisco police.
As opposed to the court?
Whatever. I mean, would you have turned it over, even though most of the demonstrators are wearing masks, and I can't imagine how you can possibly identify anybody, but let's say you witnessed a crime as a video blogger.
Mm-hmm.
Would you voluntarily give that information to the police if they were investigating that incident, or would you feel that that was an infringement?
I definitely have to say that it would depend on the situation. I can't give a blanket response to that.
Let's say it's a political demonstration. I mean, it's a political demonstration, and you're on the side of the demonstrators. You weren't there as an independent journalist, not affiliated with government, but you believed in you were part of the demonstration almost, and you saw that incident, and they came up to you and said, "You just witnessed a crime. We would like to have your videotape, or would you make us a copy for our investigation?"
I would probably try to do the same thing that I've done in this case, where I'd seek out screening it for the judge, and then make an arrangement where they were able to obtain the material around that incident, a very specific piece of footage to be entered into evidence, as opposed to this broad sweeping demands that they're bringing forth. It would also be done in public court and not in the secret grand jury proceedings, which is another one of my concerns. I don't feel that secret courts align with democracy. I feel that
I've seen, and I've mentioned before I went on, I mean, from my point of view, we've had members of our party too who have been victim to grand juries and overzealous prosecutors.
Indeed.
Josh, we've run out of time. Thanks for taking time out, and we'll follow this and hope this was useful to get your story out.
Yeah, definitely, and there'll be updates at www.joshwolf.net, so people can check out.
I'll have a link at our website.
And I'll be posting updates from inside Dublin.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks for
so
being
much.
with us. Stay with us. We'll be right back.